My parents surprised my brother with a brand new BMW as a reward for his graduation. Meanwhile, I was opening my own gift, a pile of bills and debts that weren't even mine. My mother smiled and said it was the right thing. I packed my bag and left. Weeks later, they began calling me in desperation. Please, we didn't mean it. I never imagined I would be the one to cut ties with my family. I always thought I would stay close, take on responsibilities, help when needed, and eventually take care of my parents. But money has a strange way of showing you who people really are. My name is Fernando, and I have a twin brother named Mateus. Since we were kids, we were always treated differently. Mateus was the pride of the family, athletic, charismatic, and never did anything wrong in our parents' eyes. I, on the other hand, was more reserved. I preferred reading over parties, computers over sports. I never felt resentment toward him, but I always knew that between the two of us, he was the favorite. Still, I never imagined things would go this far. We graduated on the same day, at the same age. It was supposed to be a time of celebration for everyone. Mateus had followed the traditional path, studying business administration, while I chose a different route. At 16, I began working online as a freelancer and saved everything I could. By the time we graduated, I already had a decent financial cushion. I wasn't a millionaire, but I had enough to feel secure. The day after graduation, my parents organized a small family gathering. In the middle of the celebration, they handed Mateus the keys to a shiny BMW. His face lit up as if he had won the lottery. I hugged him, genuinely happy for him. But then I asked myself, what about me? I didn't expect anything grand, just a gesture. Maybe a watch, a letter with words of pride, even a simple, "we're proud of you," would have been enough. But when my father handed me an envelope, a bad feeling ran through my body. Inside was a never-ending list of numbers and outstanding bills. "What is this?" I asked. My mother smiled with satisfaction. "It's only fair, Fernando. You've worked for years and saved a lot. It's time you contribute to the family." My father nodded. Mateus doesn't have financial stability yet. He needs support to start his life. But you're responsible. It won't be hard for you to help us with this. A chill ran down my spine. It wasn't a gift, they were unloading their debts onto me while rewarding my brother with a luxury car. And the worst part was they genuinely believed it was the right thing to do. I looked at Mateus, hoping for a reaction, maybe some discomfort, some sign he understood how absurd this was. But he just shrugged and said, "Come on, brother, you always say money doesn't matter to you." That was the moment I made my decision. I took a deep breath, folded the bill, and placed it back in the envelope. "Thanks for this," I said calmly. "It's made everything very clear." My mother smiled even more. "I knew you'd understand." I returned the smile, then, without another word, went up to my room, packed my bag, and left. I didn't shout, didn't argue, didn't try to change their minds, I just left. No one tried to stop me. Maybe they didn't even realize what I was doing. But they would soon understand. 2 weeks later, the calls began. At first, they were casual. "Hi Fernando, we just want to know how you're doing. Call us." Then they became more insistent. "Fernando, we need to talk. Why aren't you answering?" And then came the desperation. "Please, Fernando. It wasn't our intention. Just call us back." But I didn't. I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of pretending nothing had happened. For the first time in my life, I was choosing myself. The first week after I left, I stayed in a cheap hostel in another city. I didn't have a concrete plan, but I knew I wasn't going back. I had saved enough to support myself while I figured things out. My parents, on the other hand, weren't so lucky. By the second week, Mateus started calling me. At first, his tone was arrogant. "Brother, stop being dramatic. Just come back already." I blocked his number. Then my mother changed strategies. "Fernando, sweetheart, we're going through a rough time. You know we've always been there for you. Can't you help us out a little?" The irony hit me hard, this was the same woman who handed me a bill instead of a congratulatory note for my graduation. That's when the real panic set in. One night, while checking my emails, I saw a message from my father with the subject, "Please read this." I hesitated before opening it, but curiosity got the better of me. "Fernando, we're in a tough spot. We took out some loans thinking we could pay them back, but things got out of control. Mateus can't help us, and you've always been the responsible one, the one who moved forward without asking for anything. We misjudged the situation, and I apologize for that, but we really need you. Please, at least call us." I read the email several times. It was the first time they had even hinted that they had made a mistake. But it wasn't a real apology. They weren't sorry for what they had done. They were sorry because I left. And now, the perfect son couldn't fix their problems. For years, I watched my parents favor Mateus, justify his every whim, while expecting me to be the responsible one, the one who handled everything. Now that their choices had finally caught up with them, who did they turn to? Me. Because Mateus, their favorite son, couldn't get them out of the mess they had created. I closed the email without replying. A few days later, my phone rang from a number I didn't recognize. I hesitated before answering. It was my Aunt Camila. "Fernando, can we talk for a moment?" she asked cautiously. "If it's to convince me to go back, don't bother," I replied coldly. "Just listen to me, please," she said. Her voice sounded tired, almost resigned. "I know you're hurt, and rightfully so. But your parents didn't think it would end like this." I let out a bitter laugh. Of course. They never thought I would finally get tired of being the only one who sacrificed everything. There was a long silence. Then my aunt sighed. "Fernando, they always believed you would understand, that since you were the responsible one, you could handle it. They never thought about how it made you feel." "No, Aunt," I replied. "They didn't believe any of that. They just saw me as financial insurance. If they truly respected me, they would never have done this." More silence. Why did they buy Mateus a car if they were in debt? I finally let out. How did they justify that in their heads? My aunt took a while to respond. When she finally did, her voice was trembling. They just wanted to give him the best. They thought it was a good way to celebrate his graduation. They didn't imagine you would react this way. I closed my eyes. They just couldn't understand, it wasn't about the car. It wasn't about the money. It was what it meant. It's not just this moment, Aunt. It's always been like this. They always gave everything to Mateus and expected me to handle the rest. She didn't try to deny it. I think they're finally realizing they made a mistake. But they don't know how to fix it. Couldn't you give them a chance? I remained silent. "Maybe," I finally said, "but they'll have to prove it, not with words, with actions." "Thank you, Fernando. I know this isn't easy." But before I could respond, she added something else. "Mateus called me too. He wants to know if you're coming back." I frowned. "And what does he want?" "He's not as indifferent as you think. He's starting to see reality." That caught me by surprise, Mateus, realizing. It sounded too good to be true. But maybe, just maybe, this story wasn't over yet. Days passed without me returning any calls, until something unexpected happened. It was Thursday night when my phone vibrated. An unknown number. I hesitated but answered. "Fernando?" It was Mateus. "Yes," I replied coldly. His voice was shaking. There was silence before he spoke again. "I'm sorry, but things got worse." My chest tightened. "What happened?" He hesitated before saying it. "Mom and Dad didn't listen. They thought they could fix it on their own. But now," he took a deep breath, "they sold the car." I froze. The BMW? Yes. The only valuable thing they had left. They had no choice. I remained silent. "I don't know what to say, Mateus." He sighed. "Me neither. But I think they finally get it." For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel rage. Before continuing the story, this narrative was developed by the channel lore editor, so please like and subscribe to support me. Maybe, after all, things were indeed changing. I listened to the heavy silence after Mateus said those words, they sold the car. The car my parents bought for him, while they handed me a bill. The car that symbolized everything I had always known, that Mateus was the priority, and I was just the backup, the one who was there to solve their problems and be forgotten when I wasn't needed. I could have felt pity. I could have felt guilt. But I didn't. I felt a coldness spread through my chest, a relentless certainty that this was only the beginning of their downfall. So what? My voice came out harsher than I expected. Mateus went silent for a few seconds. I could almost picture his confused face, like he was expecting a different reaction. They're not okay, brother. I don't know what to do. They're desperate. I tried talking to them, but they won't listen. They keep thinking that somehow everything will work out. But it won't, Fernando. Everything is falling apart. He sounded different now. It was no longer the arrogance of the brother who always knew he'd have everything. Now his voice was full of fear and desperation. That's not my problem, Mateus. I could hear his heavy breathing through the phone. Don't say that. They're our parents. I let out a dry, cold laugh, without a hint of humor. Now they're our parents. When I was just the son who had to pay for their mistakes, you never said that. Now that they can't spoil you anymore, suddenly they're our parents. I know I was wrong, his voice came out low, almost a whisper. You only realize that because they can't support you anymore. Silence again. I knew I was right. I wanted to hang up, to end the conversation right there. But a part of me wanted to know how far things had fallen. Tell me, Mateus. What else happened? He hesitated, but then he let it all out at once. The bills are overdue. So is the mortgage. They took out more loans to try to stay afloat. Now the banks are calling all the time. They don't know what to do. Yesterday, Dad collapsed. I've never seen him like that. He didn't speak to anyone all day. He just sat in the living room, staring at the wall. My heart beat faster, but I didn't let it show. They need to solve it on their own, Mateus. I've done my part for years. Now it's their turn. He sighed heavily. Fernando, I know you're angry. But if this keeps going, they'll lose everything. Maybe that's what they deserve. The brutality of my response surprised him, but it was the truth. My parents always acted like they were untouchable, like their decisions had no consequences. Because in the end, I was always there to hold them up. But I wasn't anymore. And now they were truly falling. So you're not going to do anything? Mateus asked, disbelief in his voice. I took a deep breath and chose my words carefully. They have you. You were always the chosen one. The favorite. Now it's your turn to fix it. I hung up before he could respond. In the following days, the calls increased. My father called. My mother left crying messages. Mateus kept insisting. I didn't respond until the unexpected visit came. It was just an ordinary afternoon when I heard loud knocks on the door of my Airbnb. I stood up with a gut feeling that it wasn't anything good. When I opened it, I saw my Aunt Camila standing there with a serious face. Can we talk? She asked. I didn't want to, but something in her expression made me give in. She came in, looked around, and sighed. They're not well, Fernando. Really not well. I crossed my arms. I've heard that before. This time it's serious. Dad collapsed yesterday. He fainted. My breath stopped for a second, but I didn't show it. And he's in the hospital. My chest tightened, but my face remained unreadable. That's their fault, Fernando. They know they made a mistake. They're paying the price. But how hard would it be to at least go see them? I'm not a bank, Aunt. I'm not their magic solution. I know. But you're still their son. That phrase hurt, not because I felt I owed them anything, but because for a moment, it reminded me that despite everything, a part of me still cared. But caring didn't change anything. I looked at her and shook my head. If they want me to forgive them, they'll have to do more than cry and apologize. They'll have to show they've changed. Because I'm no longer that child who accepted being in the background while Mateus was treated like a king. My aunt looked at me for a moment and sighed. Then what do you want, Fernando? I looked out the window, thinking about the answer. What did I want? Justice, revenge. For them to simply admit they were wrong and that they could no longer use me. I didn't know yet. But one thing was certain, I wasn't going to come running back to save anyone. If they wanted to fix something, they'd have to do it without dragging me back into their chaos. My aunt looked at me a bit longer, then stood up. So it's decided. You're not going to help? No. Not until they show me they no longer see me as their financial lifeline. She nodded slowly and walked to the door. Before leaving, she looked at me one last time. I hope they realize that before it's too late. And she left. I stood there with the feeling that this story wasn't over yet. Because if I knew my parents well, I knew they wouldn't give up so easily. The question was, what would they do now that they could no longer count on me? The weeks went by, and I continued with my life. I focused on my work. I invested every cent wisely, and little by little, I began building something solid. It wasn't easy at first, but the peace of knowing I had complete control over my future was something no amount of money could buy. Meanwhile, my family sank deeper and deeper. I knew this because even though I never answered their calls, the messages kept coming. At first, they were desperate pleas, Fernando, please, just a loan, just until we stabilize. Then came the emotional manipulation, are you really going to abandon us like this? We're your family. And when nothing worked, the insults, you're selfish. You've always been cold and ungrateful. I didn't fall for any of their traps. I wasn't surprised. The first one to get ahead in a family without money is always turned into the savior of the others, as if the mere fact of having achieved something on their own means they now have a moral obligation to carry everyone else. But I didn't accept that role. I worked alone. No one gave me a hand when I was saving every cent, when I was working non-stop to build something for myself. No one helped me when I left home with nothing, not knowing what I'd do next. But now that I was stable, suddenly I was the villain for not wanting to support them. The irony was almost comical. My Aunt Camila was the last to try to change my mind. She called me on a Sunday night after months without contact. I didn't answer, but she sent me a long message. Fernando, I understand you're hurt, but your family is suffering. Your parents have lost almost everything. Mateus is trying to hold it together, but he doesn't have the same resources you do. Are you really going to let them fall like this? They've always been your family, no matter what happened. You could make a difference, but you choose to turn your back on them. Will you be able to live with that? I read the message and stared at the screen for a long time. My response was brief, Camila, I am financially responsible for no one but myself. No one helped me when I needed it. I am not obligated to fix other people's problems now. I hope one day you all understand that. I pressed send and muted all notifications. After that, the break was final. My family completely cut me off. They stopped sending messages. The calls stopped. The few relatives who used to pretend to care about me now pretended I didn't exist. They treated me like a traitor, a selfish person who abandoned his own in their worst moment. If someone from the outside heard their version of the story, maybe they'd think I was a horrible person. But no outsider saw the years of neglect, of indifference, the years in which I was only a resource while Mateus was the beloved son. The truth was that deep down, my family never saw me as one of them. I was just an investment. And when that investment didn't bring the expected return, they decided I was no longer worth anything. The most ironic part of all this is that they still believed they were right. Because in their minds, I had money, I had managed to get ahead, so I had to help. That's how many families work. The first one to break the cycle of poverty is always treated like the savior, as if the mere fact of achieving something means they must now share it and take care of everyone. But no one thinks about the other side. No one thinks about the effort, the sacrifices, the time it takes to build something alone. And most importantly, no one thinks about whether that person wants to carry that weight. I didn't want to. I chose to live my life without giving in to the emotional manipulation of those who only saw me as a walking ATM. And in the end, I realized something liberating, I never needed them. And that's why I was able to move forward.